Primitive Life, a novel by Louise Richardson. Chapter 5, Ground Zero, Part 1. The world had changed. That truth was already a cliché when Leah Pollock and the other students were able to return to Habsburg and their lives. The world was in mourning. On the early broadcast news shows in those days, there were scenes of somber crowds laying flowers at the gates of American embassies and consulates all over the world. There was an outpouring of grief and sympathy from the people of London and Paris and Tokyo and Moscow and Ho Chi Minh City and Beijing and Tel Aviv and Baghdad, and in the streets of villages in the Palestinian territories. Now there were no enemies. Now the whole world had sorrow for the hundreds, maybe thousands of victims in the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the jets that hit them, and the fourth jet, which had been headed perhaps for the White House, but was brought down by brave passengers into a field in Pennsylvania. Surely, Leah thought to herself, all the decent people of the planet can now get together and work out their petty differences. If our former and present enemies can share our grief, it seemed likely we could work with them in harmony to make a better world. Meanwhile, though, in the microcosm that was Central Texas State University, a more immediate concern was the topic of the cell phone conversation between Leah and her friend Stacy Poole. Leah: Keisha was arrested. Keisha Cummings, Stacy. Well, brought in for questioning, they said. Guess it's always the quiet ones. It doesn't figure. Practically everyone there gave a different time for the commotion. The sheriff's office is certain it happened around 10, though. Seems somebody hit Roy with a frying pan. There were times, plenty, I could have bopped him in the head with any loose object handy. So, was he seeing her all along? So she's why he broke up with me? He said he was going back to his wife. I might have bopped him upside of the head that night myself. But Keisha? And Mrs. Sharp confessed, trying to protect Keisha. Turns out she's her mother. It never occurred to me. She remarried after Keisha's father died. Said she caught Roy groping Keisha around midnight. Hit him with a pan. Took Keisha back to our tent. Pretended to discover the body later. The police didn't buy all of it. They knew it happened at 10. Stacy, they placed Keisha with Roy. Evidence. Seaman Stacy. Got her dead to rights. It could have been me, Stacy. Well, I probably wouldn't have killed him. Who knows? Given the right circumstances. Makes you think, right? The sheriff's office released the rest of us. I'm going back to the dorm tomorrow. We need to be available for the trial, whenever that happens. Poor Keisha. The bastard probably deserved it. Maybe not to die, but certainly to get smacked. Maybe she can claim self-defense or accidental homicide. I don't think she'd get the needle. Maybe a few years and out for good behavior. Yeah, I'll be back in class Monday. Too much excitement for one field trip, Stacy. First all of this, and then the World Trade Center. Should go now. Gotta recharge the phone. Bye. Sheriff Hal Henderson could not sit idly by while the world crumbled around him. Besides, his son Dennis might have been in one of the towers of the Trade Center. He couldn't admit it, not even to himself, but he did care for his prodigal child. Homo or not, Dennis was his kid, and he'd find him if he could, dead or alive. The Nordstrom murder case being on its way to wrapping up soon, Hal left the processing of clues and testimony to Otto and Hollis and the kid deputies. He volunteered his services and the services of his rescue dog Gert, a bright and tireless 4-year-old German Shepherd, to the New York Police Department and the Fire Department of New York. Maybe together they could do some good amid the dust and the rubble and the surreal waffle cone monuments which were once the towers of the World Trade Center. Sheriff Henderson. Heel, Gert. No sign of Dennis. Why didn't the little faggot run off to San Francisco instead of New York? Shit, no earthquake was ever like this. Wholesale slaughter, that's what it is. Right in the middle of Manhattan. And it might as well be Mount St. Helens. Don't choke on the concrete, dust girl. Heel, good dog. I know you didn't volunteer for this duty. I volunteered us both. Hauled you all the way up here. But we got here too late. They've probably found all the survivors by now. Just had to do something, even if the little faggot hadn't been in the tower. Maybe he wasn't. Who knows? Wall after wall of makeshift bulletin boards with pictures and memorials and pleas. Have you seen my wife? And Jack, if you're alive, please call home. And Doris was a grandmother, a Sunday school teacher, and a former Peace Corps volunteer in Costa Rica. And I've seen more grown men just break down and cry than I ever hope to see again. Goddamned ragheads. You can't just blow up your own part of the world. You have to bring us into it. I don't care if you do hate the Jews. Keep it to yourself like the rest of us. Sure, Dennis would say I'm unfair. He'd say there are good and bad people in every group. Sensitive little queer bait. Well, maybe he made it to a hospital. Maybe he was able to get down the stairs, or he was on the elevator and made it back down in time. Which tower was he in, anyway? When he gets a chance, he'll call his mom. I'll check with Jan tonight from the hotel. There's our search detail. Come on, Gertie. Maybe we'll sniff out some live ones this morning. You deserve a happy outcome for once. Leah and half of the class she had with Dr. Nordstrom were reassigned to Dr. Llewellyn's class. There was some overlap of information, but theirs soon merged with the other course. It was familiar, yet it was a different world. Dr. Llewellyn was less preachy than Roy, and he tended to emphasize the fundamentals of biology more. Leah just wanted to catch up with the new class and move on. Roy Nordstrom would be just a footnote in her life history one day, if not a lost memory. Welcome to Field Biology 201, said Dr. Harvey Llewellyn. Those of you from Dr. Nordstrom's class, I am Dr. Llewellyn. We shall attempt to move beyond the recent tragic events, both local and national, and to reconcile our combined curricula. Therefore, we will continue with our survey of invertebrate phyla. When last we met, for those of you just joining us, we were comparing and contrasting the Ctenophora and the Cnidaria. I'll write them on the chalkboard for you. Ctenophora, spelled Ctenophora, and Cnidaria, spelled Cnidaria. You will notice that they each began with a silent letter C. Why? You'll have to ask the ancient Greeks. Charles Moya, tell us about the Cnidarians. Charles Moya stood. The Cnidaria, he said in a scholarly manner, are characterized by cnidocysts or stinging cells which they employ to capture their prey. Could someone who has not memorized the text give us some examples of cnidarians? Margaret Howard, tell us, Dr. Llewellyn says. Corals, jellyfish, hydroids, sea anemones. Thank you. Diana Nguyen, define the ctenophores for the class. Yes, Dr. Llewellyn. The ctenophores are the comb jellies. They have comb-like cilia along their bodies. Excellent. Do any of our new class members know the main difference between how jellies and comb jellies capture their prey? Dr. Llewellyn points in my direction. And you are, yes, you in the denim vest. Me? I fumble. Well, we were assigned that chapter, but with all the tragedy, I didn't have time to read it. But I do remember Dr. Nordstrom was writing something about them in his new book. Was he? Dr. Llewellyn seems interested. Alexei Podgorny, what can you tell us? Harvey moves right along. The main difference, says Alexei, is that jellyfish have the stinging cells, but the comb jellies have some sticky substance on their tendrils to catch their prey. Essentially correct, but I zone out as Dr. Llewellyn parses the biological details. I think I have heard something about cnidaria and ctenophores before, but it was something associated with the murder trial. And it wasn't about biology, was it? 2 police officers and a man in a suit pass me and gather around Dr. Llewellyn's teaching desk. I can't hear what they are discussing with the professor, but he nods toward the class, sending the trio into the crowd. They surround Mrs. Sharp's auditorium seat. I can just make out the pronouncements. Evelyn Sharp, you are under arrest for the murder of Dr. Roy Nordstrom. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say. For her part, Mrs. Sharp actually seems relieved. She keeps repeating, "Did you let Keisha go?" "Take me, but my baby is innocent. Is she okay? Can she come visit me? I've been taking class notes for her." End of part 1 of chapter 5. Primitive Life, a novel by Louise Richardson.